Hey guys, it's Stephanie with the Rancher's Homestead. Welcome back. So today we're going to talk all about fermented chicken feed. Now I also did this kind of feed when we had our pigs here before we sent them off to butcher. So it does work for that as well. There is a couple reasons why I choose to ferment over just giving them dry feed. One thing to remember when you are choosing to ferment your feed is that you want to make sure you don't use crumbles or like pellets. It'll just turn to mush if you do that. So I have a feed mix that I get made up for me from our local feed store, and it has a whole bunch of things in it like corn, and I think it has some wheat in it and different things. They've created a good powerful feed for me, specifically for my chickens, and it has a lot of grains in it, so it's going to ferment very, very well. Basically what the fermentation process is you're creating, you're taking yeast and different active cultures, and it's creating it into your feed that then makes a very good product. Just like for humans, when we consume fermented foods, it's really, really good for our guts and our tummy. And that's the same thing for animals too. So there's a couple reasons why I choose to do it. One is health benefits. It's super good for the chickens to consume. And so it really gets their guts going, and it really helps in that area, in their digestive tract. The second reason is, and probably one of my most favorite reasons, I do care about the health of my chickens, but this also is a big factor, is it saves you on feed costs. So your feed expands, and they don't need as much feed for themselves when they have fermented feed. And so you actually go through less feed when you ferment them, which is a big benefit and a big plus. When it's fermented, it's soaked in water for a couple days. And so they consume a lot more water through their feed that way, as opposed to just a dry feed that you're offering for them. So chickens need about 1/4 to 1/2 of a cup per chicken of feed every day. And so when you ferment them, or when you don't ferment it, that's a lot of feed. And so when you do ferment the feed, that you can think that they still need that same amount, but it's less feed in each 1/2 a cup, 1/4 of a cup, because it has expanded and it has a lot of water in it as well. So let's jump to it, and I will show you how I do it. There's a couple different ways that you can do it. I've seen a couple different. What works for me is I have 28 chickens, so I use 2 5-gallon buckets at a time going. One I'm working with, the other one is just fermenting. The fermentation process usually takes about 3 to 4 days, depending on how warm it is outside. It could take longer if it's super cold. Now, I did find that in the very cold weather, my chickens are kind of princesses, and they didn't come out of their coop when it was snowing and yucky out, and I feed them in their run. And so after the very first day, I was wondering, why haven't they still come out and eat, even when the snow stopped? Well, I went in and checked, and my fermented feed was completely a solid block of ice. They couldn't eat it. So what I have found is that during the really, really cold weather, I do go back to dry feed, only for the sheer fact that if they don't come out and eat right away, it doesn't freeze, because it is wet feed. So it will freeze if your chickens are like mine and stay nice and cozy in their coop and don't come out to eat when the weather is yucky. I can't say I blame them. So that is something important to remember in that. It does take about 3 to 4 days, like I said, in order for the fermentation process to happen. And then it usually takes me 2 days to work off the bucket for my 28 chickens in feed. And then, so when that bucket's empty, I start a new batch, and the one that had been going, I move that over. The other way you can do it that I have seen is in smaller buckets, depending on the size of flock that you have, and having one fermenting, and then you have another bucket, or maybe 2 fermenting probably you would need, on separate days. So one starts, and then the next day start another one, or 2 days later start another one, so they're not both ready at the same time. And then you drill a hole in your third bucket, and you dump your feed into that bucket so that it drains all of the liquid out, and then you go feed your feed from there. So there's a couple ways to do it. I don't do that. I just have 2 5-gallon buckets, and I scoop out of the one I need, and I put it into my separate feed buckets that I carry to the coop, and the other one is just fermenting and sitting there. when you're getting your feed started, if like in the winter time right now, if where you're at it's kind of cold, I did bring my first batch inside the house and just left it in my mudroom. It fermented really, really quickly. After that, you can use a little bit of that liquid as a starter to get your next bucket going, and it'll ferment within 2 days or so, a day, when you already have that starter already going. So let's take a look and see how I do this. Okay, I have my 2 buckets here. Now, I just finished filling up my black bucket, which is the one that I usually have. Well, I guess it just depends on which one I'm on, but this is the one that was out, so this is the one I'm going to start my fresh batch on. Now, remember when you ferment your feed that it is going to expand. So you don't want to fill your feed all the way up to the top of your bucket. You want to give it some room to grow. So I fill it about 3/4 of the way full with my feed that I get in bulk that I store in these barrels. And then I'm going to cover the whole thing with water. This is what our feed looks like. So this, I don't know if you can see that, but this is lots of different grains. There's some corn. There is a little bit of pellets in here, but this one has been going. And so this one, you can see it's a little mushy, but still very, very grainy. And so that's what you want to look for when you're looking for a feed, or if you can go to your feed store and have one made up. I just called mine and said I really would like a grain. I told them I was going to ferment it, a grain type of feed for my chickens, and that I was going to ferment it, and that they are laying hens. And so they knew, nutritionally wise, what to make and what kind of mix to make. And then I was able to purchase these barrels, and then I just go get them full every couple months at the feed store. They just go, I put them in the back of my truck or my husband's truck, and they come and they fill them up for me right in there. Okay, so we're going to get this filled with water. You want to make sure that it is completely covered in water, and then a little bit more. This first day, it's going to expand a lot. And what you want is that you want your feed to be covered the entire time. So make sure you put plenty of water in the first round, and then after that, every day I just check the one that's fermenting and the one that I'm obviously scooping out of, and I add water as needed. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and fill this all the way up. Well, not all the way up, but at least 2 to 3 times more than the feed that's in the bucket. That way I don't have to worry about it running out before I check it tomorrow. So I'm going to fill it with water. Now, go ahead and turn this off so it doesn't flood out. Now, with what's in here and what was in the other one, I can go ahead and take some of that liquid and add it into here. That's going to speed up this fermentation process so much quicker. So I'm going to take my little scoop, and I'm going to add a little bit into here. What you're looking for when it is ready to go is when you kind of shake it a little bit, you will see bubbles starting to come up in the feed, and that's how you know it's been fermented long enough. Usually takes about 3 days, and it's ready to go. If you feed it too soon, it's not going to hurt your chickens. You're just not going to get as many of the added benefits, health benefits for your chickens on why we ferment it to begin with. So I will show you with one that's already done what that looks like when you shake it and the bubbles start to come up. So I'm hoping that you'll be able to see this in the video. When I stir this up a little bit, there are little bubbles that start kind of coming to the surface. So I know this one is ready to go. Let me see if I can get you a closer look. You see how there's bubbles that are coming up every time I stir it. That means it is ready to go. And that is it. That is how I ferment my feed. It works for me being able to just scoop out of the bucket into my smaller buckets to carry to the run to feed them. And then so I just always have 2 5-gallon buckets going. One I'm scooping out of and one that's fermenting and getting ready to go. Your feed is good fermented for about 3 to 5 days. So you want to get in that window because the longer it ferments, the more alcoholic it kind of gets, and you don't want to do that to your chickens. So I usually, like I said, I only have 2 going in at a time instead of having a bunch of them going, because I don't want them to sit longer than that 3 to 5 days. With my 28 chickens, that works for me. Like I said, I've seen videos out there where they have 2 that they're working on, and then one where they pour the whole bucket into another bucket that has holes at the bottom to drain it. I don't really find that necessary. If it's super watery, I kind of, with my scoop, tilt it to the side and get some of the water out so it's not super watery in there, but they don't seem to mind if it's kind of watery down there. You do want to make sure that when you are scooping that 1/4 to a 1/2 cup per chicken feed, that you are getting feed and not counting the water part in that, because they do need the feed of that. There's a lot of water in that feed when you ferment them, and so they're going to get a lot more water intake anyways. So I hope that this video was helpful, and we will see you next time. Take care.